All right, so I'm using Lucas Local School District's acceptable use policy because that's where I currently teach. As I was going through and making these edits, I used the article that was in the Module 3 content about the guidelines for acceptable use policies. So I kind of referenced back to those points that they made in that list for the guidelines back here and made sure that in our policy at Lucas that we were covering everything that should be covered. So the first edit I make here is in this first paragraph, and that has to do with the third guideline that they mention in the article. Begin with a statement of your vision. How is it going to benefit students? What are some strategies in place? And I think that first paragraph really kind of highlights that. But I wanted to add that second part there, that sentence that says that will benefit students' education and support growth in education, technology skills, just to kind of really hit home what our vision is and what we're going to be using these for. The next thing that I added was just the phrase here in the second paragraph where it says all students must take responsibility. I added that staff must also, because in the sixth guideline it says include strong undertones of shared responsibility and ownership, and I think it's important that staff are made responsible as well. Of course, we can't, as teachers and staff, we can't control every single thing that students are doing, but we should really take that responsibility serious to try and do as much as we can to try to limit exposure to negative aspects of technology there. As we move on here to the third paragraph, I just made it a little more specific. So where it says, the agreement of the school district, I wanted to be more specific and put Lucas Local Schools to make sure that it was, clear this is our policy. I just did a little grammar check there. Fails was misspelled, so I fixed that. Same thing here with where it says direct. Okay, I've fixed that as well. The next major change comes at the end of this paragraph where I added these two sentences. I said, in accordance with the severity of the violation, students are expected to follow the code of conduct at all times, which is our school rules. And I did this because of number 8 in the guidelines there. On the article, it says outline the consequences of violating the rules and expectations. And then also number 4, it says outline how they tie into any existing code of conduct. So I wanted to make sure that it was clear that even though, all the rules that we have listed in the code of conduct aren't necessarily listed here in this document, that those are still going to be followed and that they would be punished in some way depending on the violation they make if they don't follow those rules. So I wanted to add that to make sure that that was clear. Next set of edits that I made. Scroll down here. I, again, wanted to make it very clear. So I added here that violating any rules or expectations are going to result in immediate loss of access to technology and technology or internet. And again, that kind of goes with the same thing where it says to outline consequences of violating. Wanted to be very specific and very clear of what's going to happen if you do, in fact, violate any of these rules or expectations. Moving on to the next set of edits. I just added a space there in between the paragraphs to make it look a little better. Here's just a little grammar thing. It didn't have R. I thought that kind of sounded kind of funny, grammatically, so I added that as well. Then let's see, next one. Scroll down here to number 5. So I added under number 5 here, it says that you can't have any uses that cause harm to others or damage to their property. And I kind of thought that this had to do with a bullying aspect. So I wanted to make sure that it was clear that this is in accordance with the district policy on bullying, which goes with the 10th point that they made in that article, where it says, contemplate whether you need a statement about how you're complying with existing policies. And I think it's important, especially with, the cyberbullying and things that are kind of running rampant in the world today, that it is, pretty clear that we, again, even though the bullying policy isn't necessarily listed and stated word for word in this agreement here, that we are still expecting students to follow and act accordingly to that policy on bullying there. So that was one that that I wanted to make sure I added. Number 7 here, I wanted to add that school staff and administration are also going to monitor student use to the best of their ability. So again, this goes back, to that shared responsibility and ownership, where we're not just going to rely on students to kind of monitor their own and be responsible, for their own stuff, but the staff and administration are going to be monitoring as well to the best of our ability as much as we can, to really, kind of accept that responsibility of making sure that we're teaching students to use this technology and access responsibly. And the last change that I made was just added the signature page to the actual document, because before it was separate. So I just went ahead here and added it to the same document just to kind of make it easier, make it all in one place. So if somebody's looking online for it, they can see the signature page right there in the same spot, and they don't have to have any confusion, because it's important that there's a place for all the stakeholders to sign and date it and make sure that they have read and agreed to it. Otherwise, as I was looking through the agreement here, I really just thought that a lot of things were, done pretty well. I thought that, it showed a good, need for safety and privacy here with number 7. It's telling you don't, show your password, or number 6, I'm sorry, it says don't show your password with others, don't impersonate another, make sure you're secure in what you're doing, which I think is important. I also think that it's important with this privacy section, again, going towards, the importance of this safety and school safety. This part here, the failure to follow the policy and the breach of agreement, I was really looking at that, and I thought that that did a good job of outlining consequences for violating these, which I think is important to do. And then another part of the article guidelines was to consider whether or not we wanted to add any sort of legal disclaimer. And I thought the district did a pretty good job here in this warranties and indemnification section of, doing that, which I think is important as well. So those were the main changes I made, and they were all according to those guidelines listed in that article. And I think it turned out pretty well. Thank you.